Greetings. My name is JC Bruce, and I am your host for this episode of Sharpen Up, along with my co-host Ron Rollins. How you doing, Ron?
Hello. I'm doing well.
Well, good. We are in our recording our first two podcasts. The first
Yep.
podcast was a conversation with Ron about his art. He's broadcasting live from his studio in Dayton,
In beautiful
Ohio.
downtown Kettering, Ohio, or
All
Dayton,
right.
or suburban Dayton, right?
Right. And I am in Naples, Florida. So,
Yep.
but Ron and I are old pals. We used to work together in the newspaper business at the Dayton Daily News.
Dayton Daily News.
That's right.
That's right.
So how are you doing, Ron?
Pretty good. You're leaving out the fact that you were the best boss I ever had, Jeff. Come on.
You always say that.
You're burying the lead, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would have yelled at me for that. I'm doing fine. The weather in Ohio is lovely today. It's a balmy 63 and breezy, and I assume it's like gorgeous where you are. So
it's always gorgeous. Sometimes it's a little
gorgeous.
windy, but it's always gorgeous. Yeah. Sometimes it's a
That's
little
why
wet. Sometimes the alligators are gnawing at the front door. But did I ever tell you we have a bobcat that lives in our backyard?
I have heard that, but I haven't heard about his latest adventures. Is he making an appearance?
There is a bobcat, and then there is a Roberta cat. And
what's a Roberta cat?
Well, we have a boy and a girl cat.
Mrs. Bobcat. Oh,
well,
sorry, I was slow on the uptake there.
And so we're waiting for little baby bobcats here pretty soon. So the other thing we noticed is earlier this year, the neighborhood was just overrun with bunnies. I mean,
really?
You'd walk out of your house in the morning and there were rabbits everywhere. We go for walks in the neighborhood, rabbits everywhere, running across the street. Ever since we started noticing the bobcats, guess what?
Not as many rabbits.
Not as many bunnies.
That's right.
Bunnies. So there could be, there could be a connection there.
Yeah, nature is cruel. That's true, and that's why they call it the balance of nature. We have bobcats in Ohio too. You just have to go into the southern Ohio Appalachian foothills to see them. But what we've got, we have coyotes and foxes and deer in the Dayton suburbs. Lots and lots and lots of them. So
I remember from my time in Ohio, lots of deer because I used to eat my hosta. Here we have alligators and pythons and
you have tree rats, as you've told me. Tell me about the tree rats. I always enjoy tree rat stories.
We had tree rats in our attic. That's right.
And what is a tree rat for those in Ohio who do not know? Because we don't have those here.
You sure? They're secretive. Yeah, they're actually literally rats that live in trees, and then they jump on your house and they make their way into your attic. Then you have to go up in your attic and set rat traps. But we had squirrels in our attic too. When I lived in Ohio, I had raccoons in my attic. So critters will find a way.
Critters will find a way. So basically, you're saying that the wildlife kind of balances out, and you have good weather and we don't. So that's why you live where you live. Okay, all right, that's fair.
That's right.
So I need to ask a little bit about, for anybody that's watching this on video, they can see that the tableau back behind you is full of numerous toys, books, posters. For those of you who are not on YouTube watching this, I need to give a brief description of some of the things behind Jeff's head. There's a lot of DC comic stuff. I see the Green Lantern. I see a cutout of Wonder Woman. I see a cutout of looks like the Flash there. I also see a Flash poster. Let's see. I see a lady mannequin with a pirate outfit and an eye patch. I see at least 2 pink flamingos, maybe 3. I see looks like an old 1920s Underwood typewriter. And then I see several Marvin the Martians, and I see a second Green Lantern. Anything you want to tell us?
Well,
first of all, you're clearly not a Marvel guy, for one thing. I see.
I'm a late bloomer when it comes to Marvel. I have to say I did fall in love with the whole Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain Marvel shtick. I
Right.
became pretty big fans of all of that. But as a kid growing up, yeah, I was pretty much a DC kid. Green Lantern is.
I was going to say Green Lantern. Most DC kids are going to say Batman first, but you default to, and Batman is behind you there somewhere, but
Yeah,
you default to Green Lantern.
I do. I always thought Green Lantern was, but one of the things I like about Green Lantern, and for that matter, Batman, is that they don't actually have any inherent supernatural
Right.
qualities, right? They're
Right.
like Iron Man.
Right.
They're just,
Right.
Batman and Iron Man are pretty much the same, right? Billionaires with, great toys that,
Right.
let them do whatever they want to do. Green
Right.
Lantern, of course, is intergalactic. He's
Right.
got this battery of power and this power ring. And I always thought I love the idea of outer space. So Batman doesn't go in outer space. Batman wouldn't do very well in outer space.
No, he would he would die. But
Yeah.
now is the Green Lantern as angst-ridden and full of guilty feelings as Batman is? Batman is always a kind of a tortured, not in the old days, but the Frank Miller era and beyond, like since the
Yeah.
80s, Batman's always been kind of this tortured guy. Is the Green
Yeah.
Lantern in that mode?
No,
Or is
the Batman story. I mean, that's why all these origin movies like Batman Begins and everything are
Right.
always the best movies in a series, because the origin is always, the most interesting. And,
right.
Batman's origin story, I mean, just face it, it's tragic, And in a way,
Yep.
Superman's origin story is too. I mean, here the
The
guy's an orphan,
orphans, yeah.
space alien, orphaned on Earth. I mean,
Right, exactly. Well, so now the other thing I see behind you is a number of books. I got to say, I see a book called Mr. Manners. I see with a
Yep.
very cool black cover. I see a book called The Strange File. Yeah, I see The Strange
Right
Files.
there.
I see Tropic Press. Okay, now now we're on the talking about Jeff's creative side. We'll get back to the comics later on. You in retirement have become a fairly prolific author of sort of like Florida-oriented mystery thriller. How would you classify the mystery thriller adventure stories, kind of in the Travis McGee kind of mode, or?
Well, it's when you start trying to define it, and you have to when you're trying to sell books.
Right.
What's the genre? I think technically they qualify as mysteries, but they're really sort of adventures, capers.
Right.
Not the typical thriller format. It's more most of the books, with the exception of Mr. Manners, are the protagonist, a guy named Alexander Strange, who's a
Yep.
millennial. He's a journalist. He covers news of the weird, and he's in Florida, which is where you want to be if you're going to be covering weird stuff, right?
I wanted to ask about that. Yeah.
Right. And he's the books are written from his point of view,
Right.
first person, which is sort of the traditional style for your standard issue mystery novel, right? The private detective is sitting in his office, and then someone knocks on the door, and mystery and mayhem ensues. And that's pretty much the format. And so the reader only knows what our protagonist knows. Whereas a thriller, which is how most movies are made, with multiple points of view, the antagonist is every bit as important as the protagonist. You got to have a really good bad guy, right?
Right. You follow Hannibal Lecter and you follow Clarice, right? Yeah, at the same time. Right. So, how many books are there?
There's 5 in the series so far. Mr. Manners is the latest. The adventures start in Arizona, where Alexander Strange begins his career working for a newspaper, the Phoenix Daily Sun, which sadly, like so many other newspapers, has hit its expiration date.
It has had its
Then he
day,
migrates to Florida in Florida Man, and then the other books follow his adventures down here, and which is why you had mentioned the mannequin in the room in the pirate outfit.
Right. Tell me about that.
Her name is Mona.
Yes, it is.
Mona the mannequin. She shows up in Florida Man in the first book.
Yes, she does.
Alexander Strange and his female friend of his find her in a going out of business sale, and she's been a regular member of his shipboard crew ever since. Right. Yeah. Mona's been there. She's been shot. She has been
ouch.
played a vital role in all of it. And in fact, in the latest book, in Mr. Manners, she and that leg lamp behind my head, if you're watching this on video, play crucial roles in the story.
That's
so
right.
Normally they're on Alexander's boat, the misdemeanor.
Right.
But he's got the boat in dry dock right now, so he asked me to take care of the leg lamp and Mona while it's being repaired. He's got a pretty big gash in the hull again. Alexander is not the best sailor.
Well, so, he doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
He just needs to be able to get up and down the coast a little bit when need to be. So where was I'm going to ask about inspiration. Why this kind of genre? And I mean, of all the different kinds of things that you could write, what drew you to the mystery format, and then kind of specifically what drew you to the Floridian crime mystery format, which is its own kind of subgenre, right? Of very famous writing and success. So what got you, like you said, you started out in Arizona. What got you where you are?
Well, it's funny. In a previous podcast, you and I were talking about your own creative process and, why you end up with these Pollock-like paintings that you do. And, your answer was, or you find yourself looking at art and reading about art. That's, you're drawn to that style of art. And I think it's probably true of most writers that, the advice writers get is read in your genre so that you're, you're always, but that's pretty easy advice because that's probably what you were reading before you started writing, because those are the stories you enjoy. And, as a kid growing up, I was a big science fiction fan. I still read a lot of science fiction. In fact, I've given a great deal of thought to my next book being a science fiction book of some kind or another.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was an astronomy major before I was a journalism major. So, but I'm just a huge fan of, you mentioned Travis McGee or Robert B. Parker's Spencer, or John Sanford or Lee Child, and, all of those.
When we talk about books, though, it's funny you mentioned science fiction because you'll mention Heinlein or Vonnegut or Asimov just as easily as you'll mention any of those guys when we talk about books we've loved over the years. So I'm interested to hear you say you might tackle science fiction. Would that be because just change of pace after having written 5 books with one character, you just kind of want to exercise a different part of your writing brain and eventually come back to the strange stories or
yeah. Well, actually, because I do like science, I've been reading a lot of science fiction lately, and there has been some really fine work out there that I've enjoyed, but for me, there's space operas. What do we like about Star Wars? It's the quest. It's the hero's journey, right? So you can set it in space, or you can set it in the desert, or you can set it back in time, or you can set it in the future, but it's still a kind of quest in which you put your hero in jeopardy, and she has to figure her way out of it, or he has to figure his way out of it. And then one of the drawbacks of a continuing series, like having the same character in 5 books, is that, the emotional arc of that person's life, you can't sort of like discover who you are book after book after book. I mean, after a while, haven't you figured that out already? We're 5 books in. Don't you know who you are? So, it's like Parker's book with, Spencer. The early books were the best, I thought, because he was trying to figure out, who he was in this world and what he was going to do. So it would be fun to do something different where you could take a new character and give them the opportunity and figure out some interesting backstory for them, and figure out, okay, confronted with this problem, how do they not only overcome, the story that drives the plot, but they also overcome whatever it is in them that they need to deal with in order to become a more whole person. So that's really what drives every book. And when you're doing serializations, I think it's kind of hard to keep that up. And so it tends to be more plot driven over time. I just thought it'd be fun as a writer to try something different.
Well, also speaking of plot, I mean, not to get too deep into the writing weeds, perhaps, but I mean, mysteries, I mean, plotting a mystery versus plotting, as you put it, a quest story, a heroic quest, is two very different kinds of plotting, right? I mean, with a mystery, it has to be very Swiss watch, everything has to make sense. Everything has to add up at the end. There's rules that you have to follow that the reader expects, right? And you've got more free reign, I would think, with the latter kind of a, as you put it, a heroic space opera quest type story. You have more free reign with your imagination to go different places, right? I mean, it's
I think
different kind
you're
of writing
probably,
process.
you're probably right about that. I think it still has to be coherent, right?
Sure.
It also depends on how you go about the business of writing. I mean, there's, the sort of classic example is there's two different kinds of writers. There's plotters and pantsers, and
Right.
plotters are, people that, very detailed outlines of exactly how the story is going to unfold. James Patterson is a famous plotter. I actually have an outline that he wrote for one of his books. And it's fascinating because you can read the outline and you've read the book. Every chapter is a page.
Right.
And so it's fascinating. On the other hand, there are writers like Stephen King or Lee Child who basically sit down with an idea and they have no idea where it's going to go. Stephen King famously says, I don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, if I don't surprise myself, how am I going to surprise my readers?
Right.
So I think most people actually are hybrids of that.
With mysteries, where would you place yourself on that spectrum as an author?
Oh, I'm definitely a pantser. I'm not smart enough to actually outline, go through a detailed outline. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
I don't know what Alexander Strange is going to do next. I mean, I know the kind of person he is, but when he's confronted with these oddball situations, I mean, every day that I sit down and write, it's kind of like watching a movie as my fingers are going over the keyboard because I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know how he's going to react. I don't know what's going to happen next. And even though, there's an enormous amount of revision that goes into any writing project. And that's where, for me at least, and it's an enormous time suck. If you have this whole thing outlined, then you don't have to go back and make sure all of the pieces fit together the way they're supposed to fit together in order for the mystery to be coherent. And you try to keep that in the back of your head while you're writing. But I just do an enormous amount of rewriting, and a lot of it is corrective, just to make sure that all this stuff makes sense. Well, you've read first drafts of my stuff. So, I mean, it always needs work.
But how do you do you come up with a system as you go for keeping track of loose threads? Because again, with a mystery, there's so many that this red herring over here and this thing that happened that maybe it's part of the plot or maybe not. How do you do you have a system, or do you just go a little insane while you're writing, trying to keep it all in your head or?
Mostly it's in my head, but no, I keep a notebook where I'm constantly writing notes to myself. And part of my writing process, for good or ill, is that I go back over stuff all the time. So if I say, oh, this is going to happen now, but that's not going to work 3 chapters back, I won't wait. I'll go back and do it. Now, you get a lot of advice saying, write the whole thing out, then go back and fix all those things. But my concern is if I did that, I'd screw up and I'd forget stuff, even if I write it down. So I tend to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth all the time, which I don't mind because I actually enjoy reading this stuff. But yeah, it's a constant process of revision to make sure that that happens.
So Florida is kind of a character, at least in the last 3, Florida Man and Mr. Manners, and And is the Strange Files the one in the middle? But they're the fourth
Strange
one?
Files is actually the first one. The sequence is The Strange Files, Florida Man, Gets Strange, Strange Currents, and Mr. Manners. So
okay, so Florida is definitely a character in these, and I think I've read 4 of the 5. The state and the culture and the people, and as you put it, kind of the weirdness of being in Florida, definitely has an impact on the tale and on the things that he, as a hero and as a journalist, is want to do. I mean, talk about that a little bit. I mean, could these books happen in Maine or in Detroit? I mean, the way they're definitely of the state, right?
yeah, I think that there, a lot's been written about, the whole Florida Man meme phenomenon and why is Florida so
Florida
weird.
Man.
And you get a lot of answers. I mean, one of the answers is, well, Florida has these very aggressive open records laws, so all these crazy police reports are made public in ways that maybe they're not made in other places. Oh,
right.
Florida's warm year round. Florida's always been a refuge for criminals and con men and other kind of crooks. Witness what's happening at Mar-a-Lago right now. You've got it's always been, the mafia is always, so Miami's is an open town, so you can have more than one mobster in town at a time, kind of like Vegas, I guess. It's always been like that, and it can get pretty crazy down here, and I think people like that. There's, you go down to Key West, and there's this sort of piratical culture to the place, where people sort of feel like, they joke about the Conch Republic, but given a choice,
but they're not joking, really.
no. I mean, they like the idea that they're not connected to the mainland and that you can be different. And people do commit suicide by alligator down here. And people do crazy stuff everywhere, but they just do a lot of it here. A lot of running around naked because the weather's warm. Maybe there's more outdoor crime because the weather's nice and so it's more visible. People just do strange stuff. So and the Alexander's job is to write about news of the weird. And part of the trick with that, though, is that you don't want to just write about people who are, really mentally disturbed, right? Because that's making fun of people with mental illness, and that's not nice. But there are plenty of people who aren't mentally ill who just do weird stuff.
Weird things, right.
There's plenty of con men. There's con men everywhere, right? I mean, you don't have to be in Florida, but they all vacation here.
Right.
So,
well, do you ever worry that you're putting something on the page where somebody's going to go, "Oh, come on," or do you figure, "Nah, it's Florida"? I mean, I've never encountered that reading one of your books, but do you ever worry as you're writing it that like, "Oh no, this is just too damn weird. Nobody's going to actually swallow this," and then you go ahead and do it anyway?
I feel about that like Molly Ivins always said about cynicism. It's, cynical as I try to be, I can't be cynical enough. And I think you can't be too weird for Florida.
God bless Molly Ivins.
I know, right? I know.
Would Alex ever, would you ever think about having him travel to, you mentioned Travis McGee. Travis McGee travels all over the place in his books in pursuit of the case, right? And so even though he's Florida based, he always ends up back there. Not all the action unfolds there. So he manages to find weirdness all over the country. Would you imagine in a future book taking Alex on the road and letting him, you've lived in lots of places. You've lived in Ohio, you've lived in Florida, you've lived in Texas, you've lived in Arizona, and you've traveled all over the world. Could you see him putting a couple stamps in his passport and crossing state lines?
Oh yeah. The fact of the matter is I'm really backlogged. Alex has had lots of adventures that I haven't written about yet. He's given me notes on, and he's been to Portugal. He's been to Portugal.
That's all right.
I referenced that a little bit in Mr. Manners because his girlfriend, Gwen Giroux, is in Portugal for most of the book, working on this story about Nazi gold that they're trying to recover. he ends up going to Portugal. There's also a little problem up in Alaska, of all places, that he got tangled up in.
I forgot about
a
that.
weird discovery in a melting iceberg that didn't make any sense, that seemed sort of out of sync with time.
I forgot that. All right.
Yeah. So now Alexander's, I mean, I got to get on the stick. I haven't been writing as much as I need to be writing, right? I should be writing every day, and I've got a backlog of material that he's left me. So this idea of writing a science fiction story is he's not happy about that.
What is your routine?
When I'm actually writing, I do what I put myself in what I call factory mode. And all of the mysteries typically are around 90,000 words. Thrillers are more than that. I write 1,000 words a day for 90 days straight. Yep. And it's a 3-month project to get a first draft done. That's 1,000 new words every day. In the meantime, I'm also going back and doing a continuing process of revision. Now, I don't just start cold with no idea where I'm going, usually, although sometimes that's kind of how it works out. In Strange Currents, for instance, this is a kind of a funny story. The International Thriller Writers, which is an organization of mystery and thriller writers that I belong to and go to their conventions most years up in New York, has a contest every year for what they call the best first sentence. And so everyone who goes up there can enter the best first sentence contest. And one year, Robert Degani, who's a really good thriller writer, nominated my best first sentence, which was the first sentence in Strange Currents. Here, I'll read it to you.
Please do.
Yeah. So this is how I led off Strange Currents. I knew my number was up when the flamingo stepped on my face. Now, when I wrote that, I wrote it to win the contest.
Right.
I didn't have a book. And once I wrote it, it was like, well, crap. Now I better figure out, how do you get in a situation where a flamingo is stepping on your face? And so that was the start of the whole book. I had to construct a story around that sentence.
Super
so
fun.
Sometimes that's how the process works.
That's cool. Well, because people who haven't tried what you're doing are probably mystified by the process. You know, I mean, you can be a heavy reader, and if you haven't put your hand to keyboard the way you've done a lot of, you really just have no idea how books happen. You know, and it's really interesting to hear. Once it's written, how do you get it into people's hands?
Well, like an awful lot of aspiring writers, the ordinary process is that you finished a manuscript, you contact literary agents, you hope that you can locate a literary agent who falls in love with what you've written and that they'll rep you to one of the 5 big publishing conglomerates in New York. I mean, there are many publishing titles, but they're basically 5 companies. Right. And I have gone that route, and I have tried, and I have not been able to successfully find a literary agent, and which is a very, very common story. There are fewer agents, there are fewer outlets. Most publishing companies make their money on the big blockbusters and the established writers they have. So breaking in is very, very challenging.
It is very hard.
More and more writers are taking the self-publishing route. I went through a seminar with a writer I like a lot. His name is J.D. Barker. And he's sort of a hybrid writer in that he does allow some of his books to be published by New York writers, but he prefers publishing his own books because he makes more money that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so once you've established yourself, self-publishing becomes very lucrative. And a lot of writers have done that. So I created my own publishing company, and I've self-published these books. And the trick is not getting books printed. Anybody can do that. I've got audio books and paperback books and ebooks and hardcover books. And the actual process of manufacturing those products could not be easier. And I work with really talented designers who design the book covers and do all of those things. And managing it is a business. The real trick is marketing, is to get it out to the world where people can see it, and if someone likes it, they tell their friends. And when you actually look at the numbers of people who read books in the United States of America, in terms of percentage of the population, those numbers are pretty small.
Yeah.
And then when you look at a genre like mystery writers, it's very crowded. So it's tough. And I think that most writers would tell you, don't quit your day job if that's your passion, because the odds of, landing an agent, landing a publishing contract for more than one book, making enough money from that to live on, are very, very small. That's why you see so many writers who are actually, English teachers, or who are, going to seminars teaching writing. So that because it's a real hard racket to break into. So you better love it, and your real motivation for doing it, I think this is probably true for most people who are engaged in the arts, is because you love doing it. If you're doing it because you love doing it, and you hope that you'll have an audience that will appreciate what you're doing, that's great. But if you have to count on it to pay the rent and put food on the table, you better not quit your day job. That's just the reality, I think, in the arts in general.
Sure. Well, and speaking of that, was this something that you plunged into as deeply as you're into it after you retired from journalism and teaching, or were you? Yeah. Is there some overlap there? Were you
There's a little
toe
overlap.
dipping? Talk about that a little bit. When did you decide? Okay, I'm really gonna do this. This is.
Well, like a lot of people that got in the newspaper business, I did it because I like to write, and a lot of people who you look at the bios of famous writers. I mean, somewhere in their background, they had they were in a newspaper here and there, and so that's why I got in the newspaper business in the first place. I enjoyed writing. My problem was I got in the newspaper business and just absolutely fell in love with it. I mean, working for a newspaper is just enormous fun. I mean, there's this great camaraderie of the newsroom. At least it used to be this great camaraderie in the newsroom when we had newsrooms. Right. You're surrounded by really smart people who really care about what they're doing. Every day is an adventure. You have no idea, how the day is going to unfold. I mean, for people with short attention spans, there's no better job in the world.
Thank God.
Every day you start, you show up for work, you got nothing but blank pieces of paper, and everybody has to work their asses off all day long so you can fill it up with words and pictures and drawings so that you have a newspaper by the end of the day. And It's just unthinkable that you wouldn't. There's this incredible culture of creativity and commitment and dedication associated with it. And I just fell in love with it. And so the idea of writing novels was something that sort of, set aside because I was having way too much fun doing what I was doing and actually making a living doing it. But somewhere, in my 50s, I went back to school and got my master's degree at Antioch. And I had a creative writing program there. And so the work product is a draft of a novel. And so that's where it got started. So my very first book, The Strange Files, is an outgrowth of that master's thesis. And the cool thing about that is, I think for most people, the idea of writing a book seems so daunting. I mean, there's just so many words you got to write. And, it just seems like it's an impossible task. And I certainly felt that way as well. It was like, who am I to think I can write a book? I mean, it's just, give me a break. But once you sort of break it down into, okay, every week you've got to write 10 pages until you've got 300 pages. And suddenly, after 30 weeks, you've got a book. How about that? Right. And so, I talked about, sort of the factory model of writing, set a goal every day and just do it. And then after a time, it's done. It's like any other task. You break it into small parts and then the big parts take care of themselves. And so that's how it started. I realized, cool. Oh, guess what? I can do this.
Right.
I may not be able to sell anything, and nobody else may like it, but at least I put 90,000 words on paper, and it's in English and it's coherent. So
Right.
I really enjoy doing it.
Well, I like them. How can people find you?
You can find me on all respected online retailers like
That's
Barnes and
right.
Noble and Amazon and Kobo and all major ebook retailers. It's the Strange File series. 5 books are available as paperbacks, hardbacks, ebooks, of course, Kindle and Nook formats, Kobo formats, and in Mr. Manners, it's also available as an audiobook. I got a lot of people were telling me they really wanted it as an audiobook. A lot of people love audiobooks. I mean,
oh, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
did you record it yourself, or did you hire it out?
I hired a guy. There's a whole industry associated with audiobook narrators, and you audition them and find somebody that's got the right age for you've got to have, okay, Alexander Strange, he's 32. He's obviously a millennial. He's kind of funny. He's not kind of funny. He's real funny.
He's
so
funny.
You had to have a voice that would match that. And so you audition people and you work very, very closely. And the guy that I worked with, a fellow by the name of Nathan Agan, who is the narrator for the book, not only turned out to be a wonderful narrator, he turned out to be a great proofreader too. So it's nice to have someone, if someone's going to be reading your book aloud, they're going to catch it if there's things messed up. So it's
right.
It's a nice backstop.
That's super cool.
So they're available online and also on my website, jcbruce.com.
Excellent.
So,
and before we sign off, tell people about the newsletter.
Yeah, I do a monthly newsletter. It is
which
free.
Is funny as hell, I have to say. Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
and the whole idea behind a newsletter
is very fun.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to a book marketing school, every author gets told the very same thing. You got to have a newsletter. If you don't have a newsletter, you're not, and you got to grow your newsletter base. And that may be true for every business. I don't know. But part of the problem I see for most authors is their newsletter is it's all about themselves. It's like, I did a book signing. I did that. Well, maybe if if you see yourself as a celebrity and people want to know, oh, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? That'd be great. But nobody cares about what I had for breakfast this morning. I didn't have breakfast this morning, by the way. Same breakfast I have every morning, coffee.
Right, coffee. That's about it.
Yeah. Lee Child has a great story. He has a standard breakfast, coffee and cigarettes. So, but it's
so the newsletter, your newsletter is actually more of a
I wanted to do something different. So yeah,
well, it feels like it's delivered from the character. Yeah.
Right. And it's in the character's voice, a little snarky, but it's a look ahead at everything going on the month ahead. So, this month, the big story obviously was Valentine's Day. If you're married and you don't know that's the most important thing of the month, you've got survival issues. So, right. Then the next most important thing obviously was Super Bowl. It's also Black History Month. That's right. We have all kinds of stuff going on every month. So it's a rundown of everything you need to know about the month ahead if you want to be the smartest person in the room or on the Zoom. And that's the way I sort of style it. And
that's true. It is very fun. Yeah. And people can sign up through the website.
Yes, I've created a very annoying pop-up on my website. So when you go to my website, a newsletter pop-up will show up. You might as well fill it out because
you might as well, because it'll just keep popping up, right?
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, I assume that you will inform us well ahead of time if you decide to put Alexander to brief pasture and pursue the science fiction.
I will do that
thing for a while. That could be a future podcast, actually. I don't read that much science fiction anymore. I did as a young person, especially a teenager. I wouldn't say it's mostly what I read, but I read a lot of it, and I've kind of drifted away from it over the years, and I don't know why.
You probably grew up.
Well, people who know me know better, and as my wife says, she's like, how old are you? 8? And I'm like, well, 9 maybe. So that's not it. But I don't know what I will encounter stuff in my reading about reading that makes me feel like it's something I should toe dip back into. Maybe you'll be the one that makes me do it. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate
Well,
that.
good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Ron, it was a pleasure, and look
Yeah.
forward to doing this again on our next podcast.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, looking forward to it. I hope people are enjoying listening to us ramble on. And if not, what's
Well,
wrong with them?
right, exactly. All right, man. See you later.
All right, see you later. Be good.